Hello and welcome everyone to AMS Weather Band's latest webinar, Children's Book Author Panel, with our panel and moderated by Wendy Abshire. Now, audience, before we begin, I would like to address some of the rules for our webinar today. If you have any questions during the webinar, kindly put them in the Q&A option that you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It should be to the left of the chat button. If you hit the Q&A, then a field will pop up where you can ask your question. We encourage you to put your questions there so that we have a central place for all the questions to be assembled so that the guests or the panelists can monitor it and we don't have to hunt through the chat to find your questions. Also, we will have some specific time as the presentation progresses for questions from the audience to address the questions that come from you. So feel free to add them on there at any time. Now, I would like to introduce today's moderator. So Wendy Abshire, thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Wendy is the director of the AMS's education program, a meteorologist, and she has been a member of the AMS for 40 years. She has served the AMS in a number of volunteer capacities, including counselor, and she is an inaugural member of the Weather Band. So without further ado, Wendy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gideon. Well, we all know the stars of the show are tonight's authors, but it's my pleasure to facilitate the conversation, and I'm really pleased to have been asked. So thanks for having me in this role. So thanks to everybody who showed up for our webinar tonight, or for those of you that are listening to us after the fact. It should be a great conversation. I look forward to hearing more from all of our panelists about their creative process and the stories that they've told. And we have some prepared questions, but we should have plenty of time for audience questions as well. So please don't be shy about queuing those up. And I've cleared it with everybody that if we think a question is best asked at a point during the webinar near the time a comment was made, we'll do that. And if it's one that we think is best saved for a little later in the conversation, we'll do that too. So bear with us. We've got several folks monitoring that chat, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get to everything. So the way we thought we would do this tonight is that we'll start by me introducing our panelists one at a time. And after I've introduced them, then they will give a 5 to 6 minute introduction to the book that they've written, or in the case of a couple of our authors, more than one book. And then we'll move on to the next person with an intro and their introduction to their book. When we've been through all four, we'll definitely pause and take questions about what folks just heard. And then I have some prepared questions that the panel can respond to about different parts of the publication process as well. So that's how we're going to go through this. And unless anyone's experiencing any technical difficulties or has a question right now, let's get into it. We all set? Thumbs up? All right.
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm doing these introductions in the order that the folks were introduced on the website. So let me start with my coworker, Elizabeth Mills. Beth is a meteorologist who has worked in science education with the AMS for over 20 years. Her interest in weather started in elementary school after she witnessed 2 tropical storms while traveling in the South. Beth's book, Harriet the Hurricane, was published in 2014, and she is a contributing author to AMS's undergraduate textbooks, and also most recently got to contribute to the My Little Golden Book about weather. It really is my pleasure to be your coworker, Beth, and I'm excited to have you share with us about Harriet the Hurricane. So the floor is yours.
So would you like me to do the introduction of the book now? All right, let me go over to I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. Can you see that okay, Wendy?
Yes, we've got it showing up nicely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. All right. The story of as Wendy said, my book, Harriet the Hurricane, was published a number of years ago now, but I'm still doing a lot of outreach with regards to it, especially this fall, which has been really exciting. And the idea for Harriet actually started when I was 9 years old, which is quite a long time ago now, but it started when I was in elementary school. I was down south in Lafayette, Louisiana, traveling to Houston for my uncle's wedding. And we were staying in Lafayette, looking to make one more trip of, I guess, 2 to 3 hours over to Houston. And Hurricane Bonnie, I think, which was upgraded at some point from a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane, was just to the west of us and obviously impacted my parents' travel plans a lot. But it meant that we were turning on the TV and seeing what was happening. And I had the Weather Channel on in the hotel room for the very first time. I'd never seen it before. We didn't have cable TV at home. This was completely new, and I was absolutely enthralled, completely fascinated by what was going on. And as you can see from the picture and the screenshot, Hurricane Bonnie was not terribly impressive, but at the time it was so impactful because of our plans and because of what was happening that I was just totally glued to the screen. So I remember traveling over towards the Houston area, seeing wind damage, which was about the major impact from this very, very small Category 1 hurricane, and just being very, very interested in that. And there were some other experiences that kind of followed on this particular one. This was the one that really started my interest in meteorology, but there were a couple other times where we were in the South during the summer, and we would spend about 3 weeks down there, where there were tropical storms that were close by, and that kind of reinforced that initial interest. So that's where it all started when I was 9 years old. Now in 1988, I don't know how many people remember Hurricane Gilbert, but this was September 1988. Again, I think my parents at this point had gotten cable TV. It was a huge thing, and we had the Weather Channel. So I was watching that plenty, very, very interested in that, and following this hurricane really closely. And one thing that was so impactful about this particular hurricane is I was in 6th grade at the time, and I decided to write a report for my teacher on this hurricane, but I did it in the first person. So I was pretending to be the hurricane. I was telling my teacher about writing this report, what had happened, but it was all from the perspective of the hurricane itself. And my teacher, being a wonderful lady, gave me an excellent grade and really good feedback on this. And at the time, it was just a report. It was something I felt really good about. I felt great about that impact of the teacher and that encouragement that I'd gotten, but I didn't know where I would go with that. And where I ultimately ended up going with that is the story of Harriet the hurricane. So this happened, like I said, a number of years ago. I was talking just to a parent of one of the students that my husband was teaching at the time, and telling her about this story, about my idea. And she said, "You really should publish a book." And I said, "Well, maybe I should." And this idea stuck in my head. And through a lot of conversation, I just became more and more encouraged. Now, the process itself took time, and it took research, and it took a lot of effort, but this is what came out of it. And so Harriet the Hurricane is kind of my vision, much like Thomas the Tank Engine and his trains, or plenty of other stories that are told from the perspective of the actual object or phenomena itself, of trying to really explain to kids how hurricanes form, how they move, what their impacts are, how people need to be prepared and such, but doing it from that perspective, because I felt like that kids could really relate to that, and they would be really interested in learning it that way, much like they're interested in learning about a lot of things in that way, when something is personalized, when something means something to them. So this is Harriet, and she has quite an adventure as she forms over the ocean from a little cloud who starts spinning. And she has one thing I've realized recently is with the way the education world is, there's a lot of emphasis on feelings. And Harriet, when I've been reading it recently, I've been really talking about how she's feeling at different points and such. But what I'm able to do through this story is also sneak in a lot of science and try to be very as scientifically accurate as possible, knowing what the audience is. So these are just a couple of screenshots. This is the cover of the book. The illustrator did just an amazing job from my perspective of bringing, this hurricane to life. It wasn't the easiest thing to think about doing. And these are just a couple of screenshots from the inside of the book. So he did a really good job of making it just very colorful, very appealing to kids, but also doing a lot of fun things with the actual text itself. So it's been a joy to have this. There's been a lot of neat experiences that have come out of it. And as Wendy was saying, it's led to some additional very fun experiences and work with people who are doing their own books. So
thank you for that overview. So folks, if anything that Beth just introduced immediately brings up questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A, and we will get back to all the authors after everyone's had an introduction. But while you queue up some questions that you might have been inspired to ask Beth, I will move on and introduce our next presenter. Meteorologist Paul Deanno is a winner of 5 Emmy Awards for his work as a broadcast meteorologist in some of the largest markets in the country. He is also the first person to do the weather on all 3 network morning newscasts, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and CBS This Morning. And Paul is the author of the children's book, Wow Weather, or Wow Weather, or I look forward to hearing how you pronounce it, Paul. So Paul, tell us about your inspiration and your creative process for bringing this to life.
First off, I just have to say how humbled and thankful I am to just be part of this panel, because if you would have told me 7 or 8 years ago, when I was getting told by publisher after publisher, no, we're not interested, no, we have other things, no, thank you, or just not getting emails or calls returned, that I would even be part of something like this. I'm very thankful for the process, and perhaps you learn and you grow from when you're told no, and it makes you better and stronger. I think that as a broadcast meteorologist, coming from the broadcast meteorology side, and Amy and Brittney will give that perspective as well, one of the coolest and funnest things that we get to do, aside from broadcasting on television, is we get invited a lot to talk to school kids. And I take that as an amazingly fun responsibility, because I think that if you do something for a career and you love it and you have a passion for it, what better way to pass it to the next generation but to maybe ignite the fire in them. And one school visit in one new television market usually leads to another, leads to a return visit the following year if they enjoyed your time the previous year. And it was something that I just started doing on a very regular basis, a couple times a week. And thankfully my schedule allowed for that. So, okay, we have a regular routine of school visits. So now I'm challenging myself, how do I make these school visits interesting? And you can get a little more sciencey and a bit more technical if it's a middle school or maybe 4th or 5th grade. The challenge I was finding was, how do I keep the attention of your 1st and 2nd graders? Because their attention span is not that great. So what can I do? What can I say? What can I present that would capture and keep the attention of the younger audience, maybe an introduction to weather audience? And what I came up with after much trial and error was kind of amazing weather facts, or wow weather facts, which ends up being the title of my book. Year after year, I would try to come up with one fun fact or a series of fun facts that were it would be so interesting to them not only would they remember it and they would keep it while we had our time together, but it would be something fun enough and interesting enough that they would, I figured if it was something that they would want to go home and tell their parents about and tell their brothers or sisters about, then I've done my job. And one of the first ones that research, okay, cumulus clouds. We talked about that before. Cumulus cloud weighs, it could weigh up to 2 million pounds. That's great and neat, but 2 million pounds really doesn't have much perspective to me. I know it's a lot of weight. It's probably more than my house, a lot more than my car, but what does that mean? And especially to a young child, what is that going to mean? Okay, well, everybody knows an elephant. Kids love elephants. Elephants weigh 20,000 pounds. We can do some math. Now we've got a fun little science thing that we can talk about to a first or second grade class. Maybe they can't grasp that a cumulus cloud can weigh as much as 2 million pounds, but they can grasp that it weighs as much as 100 elephants. Now you've got a visual that might stick in their mind, as well as fun scientific information that you can lead further down. Okay, how do you get a cloud? How do you get the process of creating precipitation from that? But you've got a really fun wow moment, and that one stuck. So, okay, that was pretty cool. The next year, maybe a different one. One year it was, okay, let's talk about lightning safety. I was working in San Antonio, Texas. Lightning is a big issue there. How do I approach lightning safety? Well, lightning strikes Earth 8 million times a day. That's a huge number once again, but let's break it down. That's about 100 times every second. So we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kids love following along with somebody who's visiting them. 500 lightning strikes. We counted to 5. I started aggregating these weather facts, and okay, depending on the audience, depending on the television market, which ones do we use? And then it started kind of marinating in my brain that maybe this could be aggregated into some type of collection or pamphlet. And eventually it led down the idea of maybe trying to put this together visually with an illustrator and putting together a book. And I just basically condensed a decade into about 4 minutes. But that was the process. And my thought was this: there's a amount of times that I can visit a school, which means there's a fun can personally in my physical. But if there's a book that's out there, and this is the first book, which has led to a few others, which I'm very thankful for, the book can go places I can't. The book can travel farther than me, and the book can do more good than I can. The book can, kind of taking the mass media approach. If I can reach more classrooms through the book, maybe I can't be there, but maybe my book can. Or it maybe doesn't have to be a classroom. Maybe it's somebody at home who purchases the book somewhere, and then that fire for science and STEM education, it gets bubbled up in a place that I've never been to before. That was the easy part, coming up with the idea. The hard part is turning this into this. And it involved a lot of work and a lot of time to write the rhymes, trying to think, okay, there's science here at this level, but I'm writing an introductory book to children at this level. How do you take this and bring it down to here and make it fun, but still make it accurate and still make it sciencey? And to me, that's harder than explaining some of the more advanced things. There's a challenge in bringing it down to a level to where they still get it, but they still enjoy it. And that was a challenge. And there's a few more years. Many no's, and then a few yeses. But the publishing industry has changed, and it has turned on its head in the past several years. And a lot of smaller publishers, those were the ones that were interested in me, not the larger ones, not really wonderful contracts or offers to get things published. So I started researching, okay, what if I tried to do this on my own? What does that entail? And it entails a lot of legal stuff. It entails building a company. It entails making sure that you work with the right people. And I took that more unique path, is that I own the publishing company. And that has given me, it has created many challenges, because it's not Simon & Schuster and it's not Penguin Books. I don't have someone to call if I have a question. But it also has created some pretty, in my opinion, pretty awesome opportunities in that I feel like I have a lot more creative control over the final product than I would in another situation. And I'm very thankful that it has led from 1 book to 2, quickly to 3 or 4. There's now a coloring book involved, and actually I have a advanced copy of Wow Weather Space, which is literally going to be published next week, which is perhaps my favorite, because I'm an astronomy minor from college and have always loved astronomy, and the thought that I could put, I think when you write something, you're literally putting something you love into a physical product. And I think all of us could agree that, there's passion that's literally put into the paper of a book, and to be able to do that and make a small business out of it, and now be able to visit schools and say, hey, not only do we have a fun 45 minutes we're going to have together, but I get to share with you something that that I created, and I think it's brought my school visits. I enjoy them even more than I did before, because I'm so passionate about igniting the fire for STEM education for the next generation, that to be able to, I feel like to be able to bring something that I can leave with them and bring that passion in the form of a physical book that when I'm gone, it might still be there, is pretty amazing. So that's kind of a strange decade-long path, but that's how we got here tonight.
Did you want to take just another minute or two and show a few images from inside the book?
Absolutely. Yes, let me do that. I have a few things that the whole thing started with that visual of, I just, that always got the best response. It was, okay, a cumulus cloud can weigh as much as 2 million pounds. And it took some time to figure out that that's just an amazing visual. And the first book that I wrote, which is Wow Weather, I wanted to write from the child's perspective, as if they're telling their family the exciting weather information that they just learned. And here, it is a rhyming book, which many children's books are. But this one is a child and his mom. And then the other side of the spread, I'll scroll down here. This is my favorite visual out of probably the 100 visuals that I have in all of my books. This just encapsulates, because I use this for, I can't tell you how many times in schools, and kids, I can't believe a cloud weighs as much as 100 elephants. So I always had this vision, which the illustrator, Toby, completely brought to life, was these elephants up in the sky. It's silly for a zoo to be up that high, but mommy, a cloud weighs as much as 100 elephants in the sky. And that usually leads to so many questions. And then we talk about, how is it floating? Because elephants don't float. I mean, it's just, it's when you find a good illustrator who can bring what's in your brain to life, it really is exciting. And I'm thrilled to have worked with Toby on that.
That's one of the questions that's come up in our queue is how do you get published and how do you get an illustrator? And that is, after we go through this introduction, those were probably the most important questions I had planned for everyone to comment on. So we'll come back to some of those details too, about really how do you find a publisher or make the decision to self-publish, and how did you find your illustrators, or how would you do it differently? Because that seems to be what our audience is interested in.
Awesome. I'll unshare.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm never going to forget how the 100 elephants either. And I am not 2 or in first grade, but I love that. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Amy Sweezey, who is actually joining us from the path of Hurricane Nicole right now. So Harriet the hurricane is relevant, and how much clouds weigh is relevant. And Amy is well, let me formally introduce Amy. Amy has spent 30 years in broadcast meteorology in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Florida. And Amy has authored not one, but at least 2 children's books on weather, and also created workbooks based on the Florida state standards for science and weather. So Amy, we really look forward to what you're going to share with us about your publishing experience. And I know you said the weather's not too bad where you're at yet, but we'll understand if you have some distractions in the background.
Yeah, so far so good. We've had the rain all day today. I'm in the Orlando area, so I'm expecting overnight tonight that we'll get the worst of it, and hopefully we won't lose power and internet it was out for 3 days at my house in Ian. So I'm hoping that in Nicole, it's not quite as bad, but we'll see. You know how that goes. So yes, my children's books. I have two that are reading books. It Never Ever Snows in Florida is my fiction story. And okay, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see it better. And then Let's Talk Weather, TV forecasting behind the scenes is my nonfiction story about the weather. And right here we go. I'll just leave it like that if that's all right. From my PowerPoint. That shows the covers of my two books on top, and then the ones underneath are the activity books that I wrote. My journey, very much like Paul's, I did school visits for years, and every time I would go to a school visit, they would ask me so many questions, so many of the same questions, and I always thought in the back of my mind, someday I'm going to put all their questions in a book, and that way when I leave here today, they will have some of those questions and some of the things that we talked about during my presentation. They'll kind of be reminded of it and maybe continue the excitement that they might have for weather. So that was really the thinking behind my Let's Talk Weather book. That one, I started writing the script for it, the text for it based around my school visit. That was my process. That's how I started. I just started typing out what I said when I went to a school visit. And from there, I hired an editor who had written children's books before, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I had never written a children's book. And it may seem very simple, but there are a lot of tricky things that go into writing a children's book. So I was sure to hire someone who knew what they were doing. She kind of took all of my thoughts and organized them in the right order. And then there it sat for weeks and months and even years, because I couldn't find an illustrator. Well, I could, but I didn't have thousands of dollars to spend on an illustrator. And that's what I was finding. So I just kind of put that book on the back burner and decided, okay, now what am I going to do? Because I knew I wanted it to look like a textbook for school. And in fact, these are just a couple of the pages that are inside the book. Have you ever watched a weather forecast on TV? I wanted it to be graphics. I wanted it to look like a textbook that they would study in school. And I didn't know how to make that happen. So I kind of put that book on the back burner. And instead, I started working on another book, because at the same time, my kids were in pre-K, kindergarten, first and second grade, and we live in Florida, and they were learning about the seasons, and we were reading books about winter, and they were talking about blizzards and snowstorms and ice, and my kids had no idea what we were talking about. I grew up in Michigan. I'm from the Midwest. That's why I moved to Florida in the first place. So when we're talking about these things and my kids have no idea, I started doing a little research and realized there really weren't a lot of kids' books that talk specifically about Florida winter weather, because our winter weather is a lot different than the rest of the country. So I started writing this story, and it's a fiction story about a little boy who is born in Florida. His name is AJ. He's kind of patterned after my own son, who is initials are AJ, who was born in Florida. And AJ in my book has two sisters, and my son has two sisters, and his mom just happens to be a meteorologist on TV, which of course was my job. And so the story goes that AJ lives in Florida and he's never seen snow. So throughout the book, he constantly is saying it never ever snows in Florida, and he's not very happy about it. Well, lo and behold, his mom, who just happens to be the meteorologist, teaches him a few things about the weather throughout the book. Those little, sneaking in science, as Paul mentioned, you put in those little truths about the weather that they can learn something as they go along with the story. And at the end of the book, of course, AJ discovers that that actually isn't true, that it doesn't snow in Florida, that sometimes it actually does snow in Florida. So choosing this title, of course, was sometimes, I think, a big mistake, because the first thing people say to me is, well, yes, it does snow in Florida back in 1989. I was here in 1997. And you hear all their stories. And I just say, yes, I know. It's in the book. It's in the book. Just read the book and you'll see. So I do run into some troubles. My illustrator with It Never Ever Snows in Florida was a college student named Ricardo. He was in art school in Miami. I found him through a friend of a friend. This book was easier to illustrate because As you can see, Ricardo drew the pictures and then, colored them with whatever it is, paint or something, chalk. I don't even know, but he put this together for me, so it was easier to be able to find an illustrator. Plus he was cheap because he was a college student. And that's why I went ahead and published this book first. Ran into the same problems that Paul had, where I couldn't find a publisher, searched everywhere for a publisher. Everybody told me no a million different times. So finally I started Googling and realized, oh, I've never heard of self-publishing. This sounds kind of cool. I can control the whole process. I love having control. So I decided to self-publish. So I went ahead and did that with this book, with It Never Ever Snows in Florida. I published it through Amazon. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later. And then for my, once I got brave with that and realized, hey, I can do this. Now I know what I'm doing. I went back to my Let's Talk Weather book and I found a publishing company, a small publishing company here in Orlando, who could help me find an illustrator, get the book printed. And then, unfortunately I had to pay for like 4,000 copies of the book up front. But that was all part of the deal, 2,000 copies, I guess. And, now this book, the hardcover, is only available on my website, and the other paperback books are available through Amazon because I published them there. So that's kind of, the way that my books came about. Everybody I know has a different story, but that was the way that I did mine.
Thanks, Amy. I can just tell there's lots of interest in this creative process and then bringing it to fruition. We've got one more terrific presenter who is also published. So we're going to introduce Brittney and let her tell us her story. So Brittney Shipp is a meteorologist working for NBC 10's First Alert Weather Team. A 5-time Emmy-nominated and award-winning journalist, Brittney has written and published the children's book, The Meteorologist in Me, and she has shared her book with over 35,000 students, which is quite an accomplishment, Brittney. So you can tell we've got interest in the inspiration, the publishing process, and bringing it to life visually as well. So as much of those things you can comment on, and then we'll take some other questions and let everybody respond to questions. Can't wait to hear your story.
All right. Well, thank you for the warm welcome and for thinking of me for this panel. So this is my book. It's called The Meteorologist in Me. I also recently translated it into Spanish as well, with our meteorologist Violeta Yas, who's now in New York with NBC. So it's kind of like a little NBC family affair. But I wrote this book back in 2016. I was actually in Arizona and I was doing a live shot similar to Amy and Paul. We get invited to so many schools. And when you go, you want to share like a really cool book. And I just couldn't find one. But on top of that, I also wanted to share a really positive message. So one of the messages in the book is you can do anything you put your mind to. And the story is about a little girl named Summer Winters. And excuse me, and she loves the weather. She loves studying the weather. And she has 3 brothers. I kind of loosely based it basically on my life. So if anyone's like looking for inspiration, sometimes you just have to just look at your life story, and it's kind of interesting. I have 3 brothers. We always ate dinner together. We always watched the local news. So I just incorporated a lot of those kind of things and elements into the book. And you know how brothers are, where they kind of give you a hard time, where they say, oh, you can't do that, or you're not smart enough, or you're not cool enough, whatever. Like everyone has had those moments in life. So we kind of go over that in the book, that even if someone is a little discouraging, it could be friends, it could be family, that you just have to keep going and you have to keep studying. So that's a big part of the book, in addition to weather facts. So I wrote this book in 2016, like I was saying, in a live truck in between weather hits, because it was just bothering me that I could not find a book that I was excited to share, that had every element that I was looking for. And I also wanted to be really specific about what the characters were looking like as well. I wanted to look like, if you went to an elementary school and everyone is, very diverse, I want the book to feature that as well. So I was very specific about that when I did eventually find my illustrator. But after I was in Arizona, I moved to Philadelphia. I was assigned to a children's book festival. And when I was walking around, I was like, oh yeah, I did write a book before I moved. I kind of forgot about it. It was on my BlackBerry tucked away like in a closet somewhere. I got it out. I took pictures of what I had written, and then I put it all together. And similar to you guys' stories, I was pitching this story to different editors, different publishing houses, and same thing. I even went to this huge children's book conference with the book already done, which, by the way, they don't like for your book to be already done. They only want to have the script version. So if you have the same ideas I have, don't completely finish the book and then pitch it. You have to really like pitch a concept first. But if you get denied enough and you just are like, you know what, I can do this by myself, and you really can with technology between Amazon and building your own website. And I highly recommend it. It's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but we could talk a little bit more and I could give you more details on how exactly to do it, but you can definitely get it done and it's worth it. And then you can just start sharing. So that's basically my same process, but I do want to show you a few things. Number one, I want to show you what the book looks like on the inside, because I just loved my illustrator once I found her. And this is one of the most favorite parts of the books when I go to some of the elementary schools, is just talking about.
Brittney, we're not seeing your share.
Can you not see it? Let's see it.
No.
Hold on a second. Let me see. Can you see it now?
Now it's coming. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So this is one of my favorite pages from the book. This is just an example of some of the weather facts that we have included in the books. And then actually it's funny because I took this book to Cuba, and when you start traveling internationally, I have everything in Fahrenheit. And then of course, I'm trying to, explain the conversion, which they all get, but you can also have the kids count along with you, which they love. So the character on the left is Summer Winters. Her best friend is Monsoon. So everyone has a, weather themed name. And I think
We've had the dreaded freeze. Brittney. All right, everybody else is moving. Okay, so Brittney will figure it out and make it back to us. Fortunately, we got most of that story in. Well, what a great collection of published materials about a topic I love so much. I loved all these books as a kid so much. So let me see, there was a great question asked here. Oh, first of all, let me loop back to the publishing with one thing. Some of you commented about whether you ended up leaping into self-publishing or found a publisher, and I wanted everyone to have a chance. Beth, I believe you self-published, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Like the rest of the panelists, I did try going the traditional publishing route. I got a whole guide of children's book publishers. I contacted people, and there was some mild encouragement, but it was really just, there were things like, oh, we just published a hurricane book last year. We want to do something on, thunderstorms. And it's like, there's some of that. It just wasn't, I realized that, probably the process of getting an agent, could work for some people. And I think in terms of the broader publishing arena might be necessary. I didn't go that route. I was trying different things, different companies based on this directory, when my aunt sent me a book that our friend had written, and on the back of it, it said, do you want to publish a book? And it had this mascot books that's on the back of mine. And it struck a chord right at the right time. And I said, well, let me check this out. This is something I want to do. And so I contacted this company, which happened to be just an hour drive for me, went there. They were fun. They were interested. They loved the idea. And it worked out very well. I mean, I think like others are saying, I was able to control so much of the creative process. I was able to have my script just minimally touched in terms of editing. And I was able to add in a lot of information at the end about, website links that I wanted to do, some things about AMS that I was able to add. And so yes, it was self-publishing, but the company I used was a very professional company. When we got to the illustration process, they sent me samples of several illustrators that they thought that I should look at. And so I looked at that, decided on one, and so that's kind of the route I took.
Thanks, Beth. I think that answered a lot of the questions people were saying. How do I persevere and how do I do this? Brittney, welcome back. You were close to the end and then we lost you.
Thank you. Yes, I have no idea. My Wi-Fi just went out, but I do want to show you a cautionary tale. And
please.
I'm in Philadelphia and there's murals everywhere. So I went to a school when I had the idea for my book to get an illustrator. And this is what they came up with for one of the pages of my book, which is clearly very different from the character that I have right now. Kids, but I still had to pay in full for this particular set of images because we just basically had a miscommunication about what we wanted the character to look like. So I would just suggest that you ask to see some of their past work and make sure it really is the vision that you want to bring forward. Another recommendation is there's actually online, there's a group of illustrators that are represented like agents, and you contact them, you can go over everything you need to do. So I would just say, make sure you're on the same page when you go to, put together your vision with the words and eventually come out with your children's book.
Good advice. Yeah. Bummer.
It's
How many of you that published yourselves had to pre-buy a bunch of copies as a part of committing to your process? One of you mentioned that. That was you, Amy?
Yeah, just for the one, because I went with more of a traditional publisher for one of my books. If you do print on demand, which is through Amazon, which I think a lot of us did, that's much cheaper, much better, because then when people order the book, they just pay Amazon, but you make less money. So there's pros and cons to everything. You have to really look at all the different things that you're looking for. So yes, my hardcover book, I had to purchase 2,000 copies up front. But when I sell a book, I make a huge percentage profit compared to what I do on Amazon when, sometimes you only make pennies on a book. So it just depends on what you're looking for.
I would say the other upside with Amazon too, I sell them through my website and I also sell them through Amazon. With my website, at least I can sign them. I physically package them. I send them out to the post office, whereas Amazon, you don't know who's buying it. They do everything for you. They print them, they ship them for you. So it really depends. You could have both ways going if you want to, if you have the time to set it up that way. But you're right, there's different pluses and minuses to each one. Amazon does take a huge cut. I think it's like 70%, but you really are doing minimal work once the book is up and running on their website.
The other thing I'll mention about Amazon or any others, there are other print on demand sites too, where you can just Google and see what else is out there, is that you're on your own if you make mistakes. So it's not like there's somebody at Amazon that says, oh, wait, you spelled this word wrong, or, oh, wait, your punctuation's wrong. Like once you send that book to print, that's it. You can't change it after the fact. So without a huge cost and process. So you have to make sure if you're going to self-publish that you jump through those hoops and perhaps hire an editor or somebody that can go through the book and check the grammar, make sure the margins are the right size, it's the right number of pages. All of those things matter when you're publishing a book.
I remember a phrase that I read somewhere when this kind of journey began and the first book was published, Wow Weather, in 2018. It said, writing a book is easy. Marketing a book is hard. That's where the real work begins, because some people will write a book because it's their passion, and that's kind of the end game. The end game is book is written, I'm kind of done. If we sell a few, great. Then step two would be, hey, it would be nice to get this out there, and it would be nice to make this a business, or to make this something, make it a marketable product, and then go market it. And I have found that for every 1 hour I've spent on the creative side of things, I've spent at least 15 to 20 hours on the marketing side of things. And it's something I love. It's kind of business 101, something I wasn't used to and never thought I would do. But there's a financial side to it. And if you do it wrong, and if you overpay for an illustrator, or it takes 4 illustrators to find your vision, or if you make a mistake when you have to pre-order a book, it can be very expensive and very money consuming. Conversely, it can turn into a somewhat of a profitable venture if you learn the mistakes cheaply and then go from there.
Hey, so I'm looking at some great questions that have been submitted. One of them is sort of education focused, and 3 of them are definitely to the broadcast Mets who have published. So if you don't mind, I'll take moderator's privilege. And Beth, I'd like to direct this education one to you initially. And then of course, if the rest of you would like to chime in, please do so. So Leonard asks, or Lenny says, can these books be used as a vehicle for children to help educate their parents about the weather? Like say, preparing for a tropical cyclone. Did any of you, what are your thoughts on that from a children's book author perspective of the power of and potential of that aspect?
I think that idea could, certainly exist. I mean, I think in the book that I have, I do emphasize the need to prepare. I show the family getting ready together. The hurricane is happy that people listened to the forecasters and they prepared for this. They took shelter inland. And then there's some other resources at the end of the book that really, talk about hurricanes in a little bit more serious a note, and that would be appropriate for a parent really who is reading it with a young child to look at that end section and be able to kind of internalize that. So I think there's some elements of that in the book that I have.
Anyone else want to comment on using your books for good and public safety in terms of our field and weather hazards, environmental hazards?
I have that in my books, but I think one of the things that you learn as you write books specifically for children is to know your audience and to, have a focus and a clear, who you're writing to. And your book can't be aimed at everyone. You can't have the audience be the parents and the kids. If you're writing to preschool through first graders, then that's your audience, and you write in their tone and you write to them and you have them as the characters and they solve the problems in the book. The parents don't solve the problems for them. And so I think the more you're in this world, you kind of start to learn what publishing and books are, what good books are and what good publishing is. And I don't think your book can be everything to everybody.
Yeah, well said. And Paul, you specifically said you thought you had, won it if the kids went home and did talk to their parents about what you were sharing with them. So did you bring that into the book as well?
I think my end game for my books is that, I was specifically targeting I haven't had a weather book before. This is my first one. And my hope is that the kids, as they get older, they graduate out of my book because it becomes far too low level for them. And they go dive deeper into other books that I haven't written. I'm hoping to be maybe the on-ramp, and then they take it from there. I completely agree with Amy, because I think a couple of the feedbacks that I got from publishers was you can't be every book to everyone. Your book has to solve a specific problem for a specific target audience. If it's nebulous, it becomes noise. So I had to go back and almost rethink some of the facts and re-explain them. Okay, you know what? I'm shooting for a 5, 6, 7-year-old audience. So if I try to bring it up to partially to a 10-year-old audience, but I keep some stuff in for the 5-year-olds, I've made no one happy. When you try to make everyone happy, you make no one happy. And then, it becomes a bad business venture because it's not going to be well received, and it's not going to be marketed well. So there was intentional. I have now become intentional with when I write, and especially with the space book that's coming out next week, is that, okay, target audience, we're talking like preschoolers through 2nd or 3rd grade. This is introductory things. You want to get the science in. You want it to be fact-based and science-based, but know your audience and deliver to your audience, I think is key.
Well said. So now the questions have come in faster than I think we're going to be able to get to them all in our allotted time. Let me try this. Amy, there's a question specifically to you about Florida education standards. So let me pitch that to you. And can I invite everyone that is working in the broadcast meteorology space to consider answering in the chat any comments you have about challenges you had with trouble being under contract and working for a station while publishing a book, any pushback from management, because that is a specific question, but we have 3 different perspectives that we could get on that. But meanwhile, while you think about answering that question in the chat, Amy, was it difficult to meet Florida education standards in the workbooks? What steps did you do to make sure they could be used in the schools, if that's indeed where they're being used?
Well, and no, they're not at this point. When I first took my Let's Talk Weather book, my nonfiction book, to a couple of the county boards to see if they would put the books in the class, in the curriculum, they did look at it. I think it's nice when you're on TV in an area because then people know who you are, so they're willing to take a meeting with you. And I got great feedback from the county that I live in, which is just north of Orlando. And they basically told me that my book was written for at the 3rd through 5th grade level, which was my goal. But they taught, I think they felt like it was written at the 4th grade level, but they teach weather in 7th grade or something like that. Like my grades didn't match up. So they didn't want to use it as required curriculum, but they did put it on a list for teachers that could be like an optional something for their classroom. And they included a link to it. So that whole conversation and that whole meeting is what gave me the idea for the workbooks. I did these during COVID, and I put one together for 3rd through 5th and one for kindergarten through 2nd. So 2 different levels. And I just on my own went to the Florida education website and found the specific standards under science for weather, and found, at the end of 3rd grade, they should know this, this, and this about weather, 4th grade, 5th grade. And then I took all of those concepts and I tried to put 1 page in the activity book that was about those different concepts. And then I did the same thing for kindergarten 1st and 2nd. I then sent my pages to teachers that I knew instead of sending them to the school board or to, the people who would make the decision. I sent them to actual teachers who were in the classroom, and I got feedback from them. This way it was free because they were my friends. And so they just offered it up. I put their quotes on the back of the book about, they became my little, what are they called? Not my recommendations, but the quotes I put on the back of the book that were from actual teachers that said, hey, you should buy this book. So no, I don't have them in the schools yet, but I just did it on my own to figure out what the standards were. I assume I could have taken these before I published them to see if I could get a school that would be willing to, or not a school, but a district that would be willing to put them in the classrooms. But I did not do that.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing how that worked out. And it's glad that at least people are willing to extend classroom learning with your books at this point. So that's great.
Yes.
So we have one more question. And again, it's going back to this illustrator, because I think potentially as meteorologists or people working in the AMS community, we feel like we've got the science side down and we have messages to share, but perhaps we're definitely not feeling that we're the illustrators ourselves. So another question about the illustrators: how did you find and price an illustrator? And we heard about that from a couple of you, but I think that there's continuing interest in, golly, I have an idea. How do I make this leap? And anyone that didn't share, like, how did you find your illustrator, and how did you price them out? I think there's a lot of interest in that as we're wrapping up.
So for me, I wish I could remember the name. I think it's like illustratorsonline.com. If you just do a quick search of illustrators, this particular website probably has maybe 1,000, and they're all represented by agents, and they all have their work, and you'll be able to tell really quickly if their work is exactly kind of the vision that you want for your book. Like when I found this character might have been almost similar to what she had drawn for someone else. So it was fairly easy. And the other great thing I like about this particular website is through the agent, you can also say, hey, I basically own the rights. I'm just going to pay you outright, and I own the rights to the images, because the last thing you kind of want is, let's say, you just never know. It could take off, your specific concept, and then you don't want to really battle back and forth with the illustrator. So you can go over all of the terms up front. And what I negotiated for was about $100 a page. So there's 26 pages in my books. She made sure she placed everything perfectly so I could then upload it into Amazon's template, which they have a very specific template. So you definitely want to do some of your research up front so that you're kind of ready to go if you do the self-publishing avenue. But that was just in full transparency what I paid my illustrator. That's what I was able to negotiate, and it was perfect. And I have used her for a few other projects as well.
How does that price point compare for the rest of you with however you ended up working things out? I think people are curious about maybe what they're getting in for here.
It's pretty comparable. I think I was charged. We negotiated. I negotiated with a few illustrators that I found online, many online resources. You kind of get what you pay for. If you see someone who's willing to do it for $50 a spread being, I'm just going to pull one page out. We're on Mars. That's the spread. I think I ended up about 150, 160 a spread with a minimum of 8 or 10. If you see somebody for 40 or 50 bucks a spread, I would assume the product's not going to be that great. And you can find people that want $10,000, $15,000. I would say you get what you pay for, but set a budget. Things can get out of control, and it's your project. Oh, it's going to be great. I just need to spend this. It's kind of like house shopping. You just need to limit. I'm not going to spend any more than this, or else things get nuts. That can be that way when it's your baby, when it's your book. So make sure you don't overdo it, especially if it's your first book and you're first trying it out. I've spent more in subsequent books now that I know what I'm doing and I kind of feel like I've got the process. The first one, test things out a little bit and ask for samples. Ask for samples.
Yeah. So I know we're getting close on time. There was a request, Brittney, if you think that's the right URL for that .com website, we had a request for you to repeat it, or maybe you can drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll look it up right now and drop it in the chat.
Okay, that would be great. And I wanted to invite all of our authors to drop in your websites and the titles of your book and any information in the chat about how people can find your book if they're inspired to, the holidays are coming. I'm just saying. So, yeah, a nice little package of children's books about weather can be under the tree for those celebrating. Gideon, I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to do, anything I missed in the chat,
Oh, can I just address one thing you said earlier, something about bosses and companies, like when you're in TV? That's a big one, guys. And I did run into some trouble with this. I would get it in writing, because some of these TV companies and TV stations are not cool with side gigs. And especially if you're making money. Now I can say this since I'm not at the station anymore, but it's such a win-win. If you write a book about the weather and you're doing this positive thing with kids, the station should promote it and just make the most of it. But I don't know, there's some weird thing about you making money when it's not with them making the money. So make sure that you get it in writing, that it's okay that you publish this book and sell this book. And yeah, you can try the whole ask forgiveness instead of permission, which a lot of people do, but I have seen people get in trouble depending on how your contract is worded with trying to do something on the side, like write a book about weather.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I think the other sticky part is when you're what I try to never do is kind of talk money before I go to a school visit. I heard through the grapevine years ago someone got in trouble for saying, "Oh, I'll come to your school, you know, if you buy like 300 books or something." So you kind of have to like keep it classy. I don't know how to say, like, when you're, because they obviously want some books and you're going, but I say, like, if you buy no books, I'm happy to go and read this book to you, is kind of how I frame it. And then if they buy books, great. To me, it's not worth, like, you know, it's not worth, you know what I'm saying? So just keep it above board. And I think you will not have any problems with, you know, schools buying or parents buying or children wanting to support your book.
I used to send home a pre-order form. So I would send the teachers a pre-order form and let them send, like, the parents would bring in the form and the money the day I showed up. And that way it was all one and done. Like, it was like, oh, we need 14 of this book and 6 of this book and 12 of this book. And then I bring them with me. I sign them all. I give them to the teacher. She passes them out, or he passes them out. They give me the money and I leave. And it's very simple and easy that way. But I also tell them right up front, there's no requirement for the number of books that are sold. You don't have to have a certain number of pre-orders for me to come. I'm still going to come and visit, but so many of the kids want the books. So I would love to be able to give it to them signed ahead of time so that then they'll have the book once the visit's over.
I could tell that we could learn so much more from you. There may have to be a children's authors part 2 someday, because there's so much to talk about and you have so many great lessons learned. And I can tell from the questions from our audience that there's a lot of interest. So as moderator, I'd like to thank you. I learned a lot tonight. It was a pleasure visiting with you. And I hope that our participants got what they were hoping for when they showed up for this webinar.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.